Tell us a little bit about yourself, Rob. How old are you? Where are you from? What do you like to do in your free time?
Yeah. Hey, Daniel, thanks for having me on. So I'm 26 years old. I'm from the United States. Right now, I'm living in Philadelphia. In my free time, I end up making videos about gambling addiction, similar to yourself. I've been in recovery since November the 12th of 2022.
Right, take me back to the beginning. Where did your gambling start off?
Yeah. So in the United States, the legal age to gamble is 21. But daily fantasy sports, lottery, and certain types of, like, they call them social casinos, which is basically just sports books at this point. They're legal to 18-year-olds based on the way that the law classifies them. So growing up near Philadelphia, we are a very big sports city. There's not much else going on in the city, so it's like we kind of cling to that. So anytime that I was with friends or family, we would be watching a game. It would be a Wednesday night, meeting up with friends. We'd meet up at 7 because that's when the Phillies game would start. That's our baseball team. And if it was a Sunday afternoon and the Eagles game was about to kick off, that's when a family event might be centered around sports constantly. So when we found out about daily fantasy sports, when my friends and I were 18, through commercial on TV, we're like, that's awesome. We get to make money while gambling on the sport like that we're already watching. Like that's too good to be true. And it was. But I'd find myself betting more, either more contests later into the night, or starting to do sports betting with a website called Bovada, which is a casino license in Latvia, and it's kind of like a legal gray area in America as to whether or not people can use it. But yeah, it all started with wanting to just get more involved in the sports that I loved with my friends when I was 18, and very quickly turned into a compulsion like 2, 3 weeks later, where I was betting on anything and everything that I could get my hands on. So I think the first time that things like truly reached a point where I had to take a step back and actually kind of think, is this a problem, was about a year after I started. We actually just wrapped up the March Madness tournament here in America, which, for those that don't know, is the college basketball tournament. So it's the top, what is it, 16 by 4, 64 teams in the country go up against each other in a single elimination tournament, and the winner is the top college basketball school, whatever. Well, throughout the history of that tournament that's been going on for decades, if not almost like a century, um, never up until that point in 2018 had a 16 seed beaten a 1 seed in the tournament. Never. Always it's like a powerhouse school matched up with a school that barely squeaked their way in, like they were just on the edge of being in that top 64. Well, that year, Virginia was matched up against University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Virginia being the 1 seed and the latter being the 16th seed. And for the first time in tournament history, March 2018, 16 seed beat the 1 seed. And as a gambling addict already at the time, I would say, I'd become a gambling addict. I think one of the worst things for me wasn't when I would lose a bet, but it would be when I wouldn't make a bet that had a big payout and then told myself that it was obvious. Like, oh, dude, you should have known that they were going to beat Virginia. Virginia stinks. Even though that's never happened before, you should have known it. And my natural reaction was to FOMO into the next game. So I took UMBC to beat Kansas State, which was now the 9 seed versus the 16 seed. And Kansas State ended up winning. But the problem was that I'd put basically more money than I was able to cover with a bookie now at this time onto the game. And so, noting the system of how you would pay a bookie, I don't know if you even have bookies in Australia because of how young you can actually gamble legally. But in America, at least, the way that you pay a bookie is like on a weekly scale. And so you accumulate wins and losses from Sunday to Sunday. On Monday, you would pay out, or whatever dates he decides to go with. Uh, and so I had one more day. And I had in my head, I thought, I have to make this money back. I can't afford to pay it. So my solution wasn't to get a loan. My solution was to take more credit out with him and put it on a exhibition spring training baseball game between the Yankees and I think it was the Nationals. And so for spring training baseball, that's like the warm up games before our seasons start. And I thought, oh, these guys are probably not even going to make the team. Like, there's no way they're going to hit that well. Let's take the under. They're not going to score enough runs. I think the under was like 8 or 9 runs, something like that, maybe 8.5. And I think by the end of the game, there was about 24 runs scored. So it was an absolute blast of the under, and it went way over. Now, it sucks that it was the way that it was, and it sounds awful that it was an exhibition baseball game. But in reality, at this point, it didn't matter what the game was. It just mattered that I was continuing to chase, and I was in desperation mode. Um, and it was honestly a very exciting experience until it wasn't. That was the first time in March of 2018, late March, that I had to tell my family that I made a mistake. And the reason that I told them was because I couldn't afford to pay the guy. So I needed help. I needed a bailout. And that was really the only reason that I told them in that situation. I think at first, like the first and maybe even the second time that I found myself in debt from gambling, to the point, to like a significant point where I was working jobs to pay it off, I don't think that they ever stopped and thought he's addicted to gambling because of the way that I explained things. I think rather the thought that came to their mind was he made a mistake, because there's plenty of other times that I actually did make a mistake, like, in high school, going to prom and walking down the street with a beer can, getting chased by the cops because I was drinking. Oh, God forbid. That's a mistake. Then, getting caught with a joint in my hotel or in my college dorm room when I was 19. That's a mistake, right? That's one-off problems. The gambling was, they saw it the same way because I had made plenty of behavioral issue type mistakes. But the gambling was different because it was continuous. Like, when I got caught with the beer can, right? I didn't walk on the street anymore with a beer can as an 18-year-old. When I got caught with the joint, I stopped going in the dorm room with weed. But when I got caught with the gambling, I kept going. I just didn't tell anyone about it. And that was the difference between it, I think. And, honestly, when I look back, it's kind of a blur between times 1 and 5 of going into debt from gambling. It was just up and down, the same pattern of behavior over and over again. And then I decided I needed to change. I was 20 years old and I said, I need to change something. But, but I didn't think I needed to stop gambling. What I thought was, I don't like where I live. I don't like what I'm doing at school. I need to change the direction of my life. Let me do a semester abroad. That'll fix it. That'll let me reset my life. I'll change everything. So I looked at the map of places that I could go where I didn't need to speak a second language because I don't know one. And it would just be for one semester. And I had Ireland, England, cold, cold, rainy, and Sydney, Australia. Those were the three options at the time. And so I picked Sydney, Australia, not knowing that Australia has the highest rate of gambling losses per capita in the world by about double the next country. The first thing I did when I landed, after I dropped my bags, wasn't to like go and talk to the other students that were going to be staying in the same room as me or in the same area as me. It was that I dropped my bags and I went straight to the Star Casino, because when I began looking things up to do in Sydney, I saw beaches, I saw, go to the zoo and hold a koala. Then I saw that there's a casino. And then I saw that I could play there because it was 18 to gamble. And as soon as I saw that, it was like I locked in, and that was exactly what I wanted to do when I landed. And it's what I did for, the 3 months that we were there. Just the environment there of like waking up and knowing that that's when American sports were going to start. It really changed everything about the way I designed my day. I mean, there were plenty of times I missed class because there was a basketball game on in the US and I wanted to bet on it. So I'd go to a TAB in one of the pubs, and I would just put all the money that I had on this game. So I was basically living paycheck to paycheck without even having a paycheck. I was using a mixture of student loan disbursement and money that I was borrowing off my mom. I remember like kind of the losses. There was one day where I had been to the casino 3 or 4 days in a row, and I was playing craps, and the craps dealer was a guy pretty close to my age, I think, and he was like, "Dude, you've been here a couple days in a row. Like, what do you do for work?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't." like I'm a student. And he said, get the fuck out of here. And I was like, no. I was like, no. He's like, you're gonna lose all your money. You need to leave. During COVID, I qualified for like $11 of unemployment, but the government passed a program to try to help, and this did help, families that needed it, but millions of people didn't need this. They passed a $600 stimulus on every unemployment check. And so now I was living at home with my family. I had no expenses. I had a gambling addiction. I was 21. And I had $11 of unemployment that turned into $611 of unemployment every single week. So, we're not talking about millions of dollars, but we're talking about just lumps of disposable income that fed my ability to play poker online. And for 3, 4, 5 months, whatever it was until Korean baseball came back, that's all I did was poker and casino. Then Korean baseball came back and I started doing sports betting, and it was all just a big blur because from 21 to 22 we didn't leave the house. There was plenty of times where I was like, I can't believe I just did that. I'm crying, I'm depressed, I'm needing to borrow money for bailouts, that kind of thing. But it still wasn't to the point where I said it was a gambling addiction. It was still to the point where it was mistakes that I shouldn't have been making. It was dumb decisions, it was bad bets, it was impulsive bets. It wasn't a gambling addiction, it was mistakes over and over again. Um, and I don't think that I thought it was a gambling addiction until February 8th. The girl that I was dating in college was from Athens in Greece. And so I had a flight booked for after graduation to go and visit her family. And we broke up. So I had a flight that I couldn't get refunded. I told a friend, do you want to go? We could change it. We couldn't refund it. We could change it to a different place. So we went to Rome, and we ended up having like the best vacation ever. We made a lot of friends while we were there, and one girl that I wanted to meet up with was Romanian. And so I came back home after that Rome trip. I had a big gambling win on a big sports bet, and I always told myself, you're gambling so that you can do whatever you want, travel the world, not have to work a normal job. Like, use this money and go and visit her. Let's go meet up in Paris. Like, why not? And so I was like, yeah, like that's great. I'm the man. This is gonna be awesome. And I fly to Paris and I meet her there. And about 2 hours after we arrive, I'm in the hotel room bathroom, and I pull my phone out, and she's taking like a phone call, and I compulsively just start spinning slots on my phone, and I spin away all of the budget that I had for the remainder of that trip. And that was the first time that I asked myself, why did you just do that? Because there were plenty of times where I asked myself, well, why'd you just do that? And I had an answer. And I was like, oh, because you thought that this guy would win. Last time you bet him, he won. Or this was a great matchup. It was just bad luck. There was always that. I'm sitting there in the bathroom in Paris, and I have no money left for this trip that's going to last another week. And I'm like, I don't know why I just did that. There was no reason for me to do that. And I ended up calling a friend. The friend ended up giving me more money that would, cover me for the rest of the trip, and I had to pay him back. But that was the first time that I even conceptualized that this could be an addiction. And when I came back from that trip in Paris, I finally went to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. And that was the first time that I properly said, oh, well, shit, it's very obvious now that I'm a gambling addict. After we went through the 20 questions and I answered yes to all 20. But once I started going to those meetings, I actually strung together about 9 months of time away from gambling. Uh, Relationships were rebuilding and life was going decently normal, I would say. The problem was for me, I felt like a ticking time bomb. So it was 9 months after I had first entered Gamblers Anonymous, and it was November the 12th of 2022. And up until that point, I was fighting urges, especially that last week before I did it, of like, yeah, you should make a little bet. I'm like, no, no, it's, I'm a gambling addict. I shouldn't make this bet. But you're bored. You're not doing anything anyway. Your money's back. Like, it's not that big of a deal if you just make a bet. And so, I worked through that back and forth in my head until finally I said, screw it. I'm just going to make one bet. And the morning of November the 12th, I made a sports bet and it won. But in certain books here, certain sports books here, And I would imagine it's not the case in Australia, but it could be if someone uses like a stake or like a roulette over there. Um, this was a US based casino in Pennsylvania, but I tried to withdraw it right away because I felt guilty having placed the sports bet. I said, you know what, that was a mistake. I want to take this money out. I want to close this account. I want to self exclude and get back to a meeting. So I go to make the withdrawal, and they tell me there's a 24-hour hold period on the amount for whatever reason. They didn't actually ever give a reason now that I think about it. And I was like, that's unacceptable. I'm going to go to the casino, to the cashier's desk, and I'm going to demand that they pay me out right there. That'll work. And I got in the car and I went there. I got in an Uber rather, and I went there. I got to the desk and I said, "Hey, I want to make this withdrawal. I want to close this account afterwards." And they were like, "Oh, well, it says you have to wait 24 hours." I was like, "What do you mean? I'm right here. I see that you have money in that drawer. Just pay me what's in the account." They're like, "Wow, we can't. It's against our policy." So I was like, oh, whatever. The Uber was about a 35, 40-minute drive from where I was living. So now I was basically on an island in a casino, not a real island, a metaphorical island, but I was on an island in a casino. Just had a win with only like an hour or two since my last bet. And I was like, huh. Well, I could just gamble the amount that I won. And if I lose, then it's like nothing ever happened anyway. That thought led to a 12-hour gambling binge in that casino where I put myself into debt for the next 6 months, working basically like 70, 80-hour weeks. But the one beautiful thing that came out of that day is the thought that does keep me away from gambling now to still to this day. It was about 8 or 9 hours in, which sounds crazy, but as a gambling addict, maybe that's something people can relate to. It was like 8 or 9 hours into the session at this casino, and I had gone up and down, and I was right around like minus 30% of what I had taken out, and I had it all in loose bills rolled up into a wad, and I had it in my pocket, and my phone was in the same pocket. And I went to the bathroom and I tried to reach in to take out my phone, for probably to check on a bet. I don't even remember why, but when I went to reach out for my phone, the dollars fell out of my pocket and onto the floor. And so I had more money than I've ever seen in my life on the bathroom floor. And I was scrambling around, like picking everything up. And I got everything finally, and I took a deep breath. And I was like, and I started laughing. And the reason that I was laughing is because I had this thought: the money that's in your hand right now, throw it back. Just throw it back on the ground. Because if you do that, then someone might pick it up. Someone might leave with that money, and they might have a good day. But if you leave with that money, you're going to lose it back there. Whether it's the next bet, 10 bets, or 100 bets from now. You're going to eventually lose it because all wins are future losses. And that thought, it didn't stop me that night. I went back out and I lost the rest of that money as I had predicted in my head. But it's the thought of like you're better off throwing this money in the trash on the ground, letting it on by, or throwing it into the wind than you are gambling it. So when I was quitting back then, I was 24, but I told my mom, I was like, hey, I need help. And I needed her to manage my bank account, which felt embarrassing. It felt really annoying because I now had to ask my mom for things that were technically mine. But that was all in my head. Like in reality, it changed nothing about my day to day life. And it kept my money basically in a forced savings account. The force being my mom yelling at me as a 24-year-old if I was to go and try to gamble it. So, it felt bad at the time, but it really allowed me to accumulate enough money to pay down debts without really feeling that temptation to ruin myself. Going to support group meetings was the next step. Like, therapy is great, especially if they're trained in gambling addiction recovery. But in America, at least, that's a pretty rare certification at this point. And so the value of going to a support group where people understand what you've been through is just invaluable. A lot of people that go to group meetings will say, giving back and telling your story to people who are going through it right now helps you in your own recovery, and it gives you a sense of meaning and purpose in your story. And the true beauty is that when you go and you share your story online, whether it's one person, 1,000 people, or 1,000,000 people that watch it, you can impact someone's life in a positive way. And, not to selfishly say you could save someone's life, but it's true. I mean, think about the times that you were at your absolute lowest. If you had saw someone online telling you that they had gone through the exact same thing, that could really change your perspective on where you're at. And that's a hope that I have from doing episodes like this with you, Daniel. I hope that people watch this and can say, hey, I get it. I went through that same thing just a couple days ago. What can I do to get help? And we've kind of laid out some steps here today of what people can do.
I just want to thank you so much for again taking the time to do this interview, and thanks again.
Of course, thanks for having me.